outside. It's not easy to come inside, isn't it? In any case, let's start. In this session, we have got 5 speakers, but looks like one person is still not here. But let me introduce myself. My name is Moazzem Hossain. I work at Griffith University, Brisbane, Australia, over a long period of time. And I'm also with this organization, WASD, working with alum from the beginning. So you can see I'm one of the people who were with WASD over a long period of time as well. And I would like to introduce our rapporteur in this session, Dr. Nahlaa A. Khalifa. And she is an assistant professor at King Abdulaziz University, Saudi Arabia, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And let me introduce a couple of our speakers, and then I will request Dr. Nahlaa Khalifa to introduce 2 more. On my left is Susann Stritzke. She is from University of Oxford, and her presentation is on implementing the first solar PPP in Zambia, policy implications and learning lessons. Very interesting. We look forward to your presentation, Susann. And I would also like to introduce Vilma. Dahiana, is it? Vilma? And she is from University of Tolima, Colombia. And her presentation is on sustainable economic development in post-conflict Colombia. Again, this one is very interesting as well. May I now request Dr. Nahlaa Khalifa to introduce the rest of our speakers. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Our third speaker is Dr. Sarra Saad. She is from Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research, Sudan. She will introduce her topic about combating desertification in Sudan, experience and lessons learned. And on my right side, Dr. Ghassan Abu-Lebdeh from American University, Sharjah, UEA, and he will deliver a topic about understanding attitudes, generations, why towards transport, up the case of Dubai. Welcome.
Then please, so you are there, yes, is it?
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
And
the same topic with Dr. Sarra, Sufyan, is Sufyan Ossman, Minister of Oil, Sudan.
And also Alam Mohammed, looks like here.
Yeah.
Right. Alam here?
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. And without making further, yeah, Mike? Yes, please. Yeah. It looks like it was on, then I turned it off. Okay. And the first speaker in this session is Susann, and she is going to talk about the implementing the first solar PPP in Zambia. Thank you. Before that, you have got 10 or 12 minutes, but my own sort of, objective is we can even give you 15 minutes, but that includes the discussion or question and answer, Q&A, right? Each of the presentation, we would like to do that. Otherwise, we just forgot what you say as a first presenter and after the lunch. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Moazzem. Thank you very much, Nahlaa. Let's get this started. Oh, wow, there we are.
Yeah.
I will now present mainly the findings of our research project, which is called Making Light Work. And it's evaluating the launch of the Scaling Solar program in Zambia as well as other countries in Africa. And the Scaling Solar program is the first solar PPP in Zambia. Just as a side note, our research project was funded by the British Academy, so we're acting as independent researchers from any other institutions here. And if you are interested in learning more about it, this presentation is also a condensed version of my paper called Clean Energy for All, the implementation of scaling solar in Zambia, which will be published in the World Journal of Science and Technology as the special edition for this conference. So just to give you a brief introduction what we are talking about, Zambia is one of the countries in sub-Saharan Africa which has an urgent need to enhance its energy supply. As you can see, the electrification rate is rather low. Only 31% of the population in the country has access to energy, and there's a huge gap between demand and supply, which became dramatic in 2015 as Zambia was facing a drought, and as you can see, it draws 83% of its energy from hydropower. That means that it's a very clean energy solution, but it's also very much affected by climate change, and shortages of rainfall created an energy crisis. As a result, the Zambian president directed the Zambian Industrial Development Corporation, which is a state-owned agency, to procure 600 megawatts of solar power through the Scaling Solar program in 2015 to overcome this national crisis. Just to give you a brief background of the program, it's basically designed by the IFC, or the World Bank's IFC. It's a program to support governments to procure solar energy at competitive prices, especially in developing countries. The program will be implemented by the governments of these countries in cooperation with the IFC. And the core of the program is to provide a number of services like insurances, financing options, and risk packages to improve the implementation and the financeability of energy infrastructure projects. The projects within the Scaling Solar program are based on very complex contractual agreements. This means the developer who wins the bid owns 80% of the project company. The state-owned government agency who rolls out the project owns 20%, and they sell the energy to the national utility. So that's a very complex construct. And the developers or the bidders are evaluated, or they are awarded the project through a reverse auction process. So basically the government, or in this case the Industrial Development Corporation, puts out a project, a tender for 50 megawatts, and who bids the lowest price will win the project. The program has caused a lot of debate in the previous years, especially with regard to the prices that have been achieved during the first rounds, which are very low, which is good. But there are also debates whether this basically kills the market for renewable energy in these areas. There were questions about local content and local involvement, since all bidders were foreign companies, or also the projects were awarded only to foreign companies. And there's also a debate about the conflict of interest because of the involvement of the procuring company in the project company. As I mentioned, it's the Scaling Solar Round 1 in Zambia is the first solar project at all at that scale. So Zambia has no real solar energy projects installed so far. And when the bids were announced, very low tariffs were achieved in 2015-16 during the first round, which was very positively received in the region. And a second round has been launched in May 2017, but we're still waiting for the next step within that round. So what are the framework conditions? And I think these conditions are very important when we consider the implementation of this PPP in Zambia. As I said earlier in the session before, all PPPs are different, all countries are different. So there are very specific conditions for this project implementation. And Zambia had the problem to attract foreign investment due to high-risk patterns, which made financing for any infrastructure project very expensive. And so there was an urgent need for a solution here, basically. And it can be said that the risk guarantees and the financing option provided by the World Bank in this program were an important precondition to launch such a scale project at all, renewable energy project in Zambia. We have a little crash in the computer. Okay, no, it's all good. Okay, the implementation of the. Okay. The second important point here, if we link it to the public-private partnership concept, is to note that Zambia has a formal framework for public-private partnerships, which is developed but not applied. So the implementation of the project happened largely outside that framework. So there was no really independent actor or unit to oversee the project implementation. So there was this question of transparency and control that still hangs over the whole project. So where are we now with round one? So all my analysis is focused on the first round of scaling solar in Zambia, as the second round is still at the very early stage. As you can see, everything went very smoothly, bid preparation, project preparation, tender process and award, everything was totally fine. But now we have an issue with financial close, and nobody really knows when the projects will be commissioned. So the initial goal of the Scaling Solar program was to have these projects online within 24 months, but now we have a delay of roughly 14 months. Financial close for one project was announced in December last year, 2017, which is still debated. So ZESCO says something different than the IFC. And the financial close for the second project is still open. So the question arises, what are the problems? Why is this project delayed? And we did an analysis. And we looked into the concept of critical success factors for public-private partnership. That's a concept that has been evaluated in a lot of studies. And we found 5 major critical success factors for the implementation of public-private partnership infrastructure projects in several countries, not only in Africa. And we have checked, and found out that all of these 5 major CSFs were met, and all the requirements were fulfilled by the program, since it was very well designed. So the question still remains, why is the project delayed if all these requirements were met? And we found through our empirical research, which was based on stakeholder interviews, a lot of them very confidential, there was a matter of public stakeholder alignment and public stakeholder capacity and expertise. So these are 2 different areas which are closely related to each other. And these 2 factors had a very high impact on, and still have a high impact on project implementation. So that's rather abstract. So the question is, what does that mean in detail? So you can see here 3 pictures. The first and the last one refer to the site of the project. There were huge problems with the geotechnical conditions of the site. The shape wasn't optimal. In the middle, you see an irradiation map, so that data was not correct. So developers had a huge problem in actually developing the site, and they were not involved in selecting the site. The site was chosen by Zambian Development Agency, who has never implemented such a project before and was not really aware of the requirements of such a project. The second issue was were matters with a legal energy framework in Zambia. There were a lot of hiccups between the agencies, whether the grid code has to be changed or not, and developers were waiting. So these were all factors that delayed the project. And it also became apparent that the lack of an independent coordinator of the process was a problem in this project, and still is, because there has been no change really in the project structure. What are the learning lessons here briefly? So we can basically draw three conclusions, or conclusions for three different areas here. The first is for the public sector, and the project has shown, and the analysis has shown, that these projects need a longer time preparation, which does not only mean the focus on the technical details, they were all perfectly met, or the financial criteria. It also means that getting people on board, getting agencies on board, and if it's the first time that such a project is implemented, we need to build know-how and capacity, so we can't blame someone for not, choosing the right side or fulfilling our criteria, but there has to be a capacity building procedure in place before such a process is launched. And we need someone who is neutral, who is has any interests in the project, who coordinates and oversees the process. Second, the private sector has a lot of risk appetite at the moment. There's kind of a race for implementing renewable energy projects in Africa. We have recently seen in Senegal, where Scaling Solar has announced his first round results with prices under $4. So developers really need to consider whether their risk appetite is adequate in such an environment. And for the Clean Energy for All initiative, it also means that shall we think big or shall we rather think small? Because do we rather invest in smaller projects, or do we focus on one or two large projects? If they fail or if they delay, they have a huge impact. There are also issues in terms of grid capacity, and at the end, it must be said, the electrification rate in rural areas in Zambia is 4%, only 4%, and these projects will not help these people to get access to clean energy in the future. So we need to think about alternative concepts here and whether these large-scale energy auctions are the right solution. So there are a number of further implications for other projects. And I think a central element is also the question of community benefits. This concept has been proven in the REAP program in South Africa. We need to think about local content. Don't we create new dependencies if we only have foreign developers who get in with their workforce, get out with their workforce with these processes? And how do we move on with alternative project solutions? I want to invite everyone who's interested. We're having a workshop at Oxford on June 7th on questions of sustainable electrification in Africa. So whoever is interested, please email me. You find my email address on the presentation. And please read the paper if you want more information on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's quite interesting to see that the Zambian public sector joining with the private sector on this particular issue. Before I ask for questions from the floor, may I just take the opportunity to ask you first? The first question is on the IFC. We haven't said much on IFC, so can I just please elaborate what exactly their role in there?
Okay. International Finance Corporation, I think a lot of people know them. Yeah. They actually developed the Scaling Solar program independently from Zambia or any country in cooperation with other World Bank agencies, and they're involved in the rollout of the program in the country. So they are coordinator between the World Bank and the project company in terms of financing, but they're not involved actually as a shareholder in the project company.
Right. Thank you. That's clear. May I now ask the floor? Yes, please. Can you please speak loudly and your name, please?
Okay, my name is Dr. Mayada Abu Affan. I'm a consultant in public health with Dudley Local Government in the UK. Thank you very much. There is huge potential in terms of solar energy in Africa, especially where I'm originally from, like Sudan. So my question is, you mentioned the community benefits as something to explore further, but would this project measure the impact on fuel poverty and economic prosperity? Because this is, I think, the lever to roll it out to other African countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The answer is, at the moment, unfortunately, no, we're not looking into energy poverty issues. We're just evaluating the take of this project and the success factors for this particular program in Zambia. But we're currently putting a proposal for clean energy solutions and further explore these opportunities in terms of local business development, energy policy frameworks, and community needs and benefits. So we'll wait to hear next month, and then I hope we can further work on that topic.
Anyone else, please? Yeah.
Like Mayada, actually, I would like to extrapolate to other countries, because Zambia is not unique in many of the problems you are talking about. Particularly, this is true for most of sub-Saharan Africa. And this is why I'm interested, because this is a type of public-private partnership which didn't go quite right. And therefore, there must be some kind of lessons to be learned and lead to some kind of guide of how to apply PPP in Africa or in the sub-Saharan Africa or in developing world generally. So any thoughts about this?
I mean, yes, I presented a number of policy implications, and with this specific program, and I think we heard that earlier from Danilo, that there is a need for oversight. That's very, very important with any kind of PPP project, and the question of independent coordination with someone who has no interest in the project itself. That's one important aspect. And the other aspect is also look into innovation. Do we really need these state-led processes, or do we have other opportunities to support innovative business development models, innovative energy projects in Africa? Because these are state-led and they attract foreign investment, which is good in the short run, but they might create new dependencies between developed and developing countries. So they need to be seen critical. They are an opportunity for now, but they cannot be the future forever, future solution.
Thank you. Yes, please. Yeah. Yes, yes.
Okay, thanks. I'm Dr. Prom Jackson, and I'm an inspector with the Joint Inspection Unit. My colleague Petru is coordinating this. I want to thank you very much for this presentation, and I joined colleagues before me who spoke to the importance of this particular initiative, and especially as we look at alternative energy and the solar energy, which is quite important for Africa and hopefully would address issues of efficiency. I do have a question, and I think people have asked questions about lessons learned. I was quite surprised, actually, with two things. One is that the IFC has been doing these projects for quite a while. And it was quite interesting that the lessons learned over so many years actually were not applied in this particular case. So I was very, very surprised, both from the IFC as well as the World Bank. And I worked with the World Bank for 15 years. And I'm just wondering why some of those, is it that we don't know how to learn, or is it that these are so very different? Every time we do one of these things that the lessons would be different, in which case they're not generalizable, and in which case then you actually develop the lessons inherent to the context and carry that out. My second point is, and I want to make this point being an African, I do make this point in every fora in Geneva. And that point being, people speak for Africa and continue to come to speak for Africa. I fully appreciate the fact that this is your project, but it's a little bit daunting when Africans are not on the table. I acknowledge the presence of the Maghreb, the Arab states, in this forum, held by my colleague, and I think that is most welcome. But what I find totally missing is the face of Africa, be it West Africa, South Africa, and somebody else is speaking for them. And this is a point I make in all fora, and it doesn't include the JIU holding fora in Geneva. And I would like everybody to take note of that factor and that you consider it. Well, we always have the excuse it's either distance or something else. I think it's an important factor to consider as we move forward in the rest of the world. And it actually hurts me being here in Geneva. The Africans are either the ones running the mic.
Excuse me. Sorry, could you just put a little bit short?
I'd like to make this point, and it's not only a political, it's also a point as we move forward in the 2030 agenda for inclusion and national ownership, that we consider who really are the beneficiaries we're talking about, and that we don't continue to play the dominance of power in knowledge, to later on take this knowledge and impose it on people. Thank you very much. I'm sorry if I took a bit more time, but my comment is quite general, and it's not specific to just this presentation.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. I tried to respond as briefly as possible. Maybe we start with the second point, and I can't agree more on this. And I'm missing African faces as well. I mean, there are a lot of fellows from the Sudan, but also from sub-Saharan Africa, Zambia or Kenya, Tanzania. Where are you? Please make yourself visible. So I see that as an important point. And we have been working on that project together with the University of Cape Town, because this is a knowledge hub for energy research in Africa. As I said, the know-how about solar energy in Zambia is yet very limited, but in the future project we try to take that into account and roll out workshops and university exchanges with Zambia, with universities of Uganda. So that's definitely a goal, but I can't agree more on that. Thank you for bringing that up. I think that's very important. And the first question, why haven't we learned? I mean, it's maybe just too easy to say, okay, because we ignore everything that we have heard before. And we also see that mistakes are always made again and again. I think in Zambia it was a special case because there was a high political urgency, and they had the energy crisis. It was an election year, so there were a lot of factors that contributed to the fast speed, or to the push that was the pressure behind the program to implement it as quickly as possible. Nevertheless, I totally agree. So I'm not an insider from the IFC nor the World Bank, so I cannot say what mechanisms they have in place to transport learning lessons, but apparently they need a good mechanism or need to improve that mechanism. So yeah, there were these two factors, country-specific as well as institutional issues within these organizations.
Thank you. Given the importance of this topic, is there anyone else who would like to ask any question, please? Yeah, thank you.
Sadiq Moazzem from Multimedia University, Malaysia. Actually, it's a not question. Please, if you involve any research in Africa, involve Africans. And this is obviously people talk by the name of Africa, but there are no African there. So in the future, please involve Africans to be part of your team. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think thanks very much, Susann. And I'm sure you have lots of questions in the future on this, and me too. So let's go. Sorry, it's playing. The second speaker is, Sarra Saad, A.M. Saad, Alam Ahmed, and Sufyan Ossman, A.M. Ossman. And they are going to present on combating desertification in Sudan, experiences and lessons learned, and other lessons. Thank you. Please, Sarra.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our presentation is compact on desertification in Sudan, experiences and lessons learned. It's a joint research done by me, Sufyan, and Alam, and other 2 colleagues, as Adil, Sid Ahmed, and Professor Ahmed Al-Douma from Sudan. They couldn't make it to come to Geneva. So I appreciate their help in writing this paper. Sudan is from Africa country, and now the problem of desertification is very huge. As you can see in the map in the right side, Sudan, after separation of the southern part of the country, 72% of the country total area is classified as desert, with low and medium soil fertility. Currently, we are facing problem of agricultural production in Sudan. Here it is serious. And from the map here, we are monitoring desertification. As you see in the pink color, the desertified area, and the blue and yellow color is areas under threat. The challenge now is how can we invest this land? This is a real problem now in Sudan. And the land degradation are among central problems for sustainable development of dry land ecosystem, and now is a challenge, how can we invest in these areas? I don't know what about this slide, Selma? I think it's left. Desertification, I think the map, they are lost from the slide. I'm not sure. We can continue. Desertification is always accompanied with shortage of rain, and rainfall is becoming increasingly scarce and unreliable for Sudan's Sahel belt. This trend is likely to continue. On this basis alone, large tracts of the Sahel will be severely impacted by declining food productivity over the next generation and beyond. Droughts and insufficient rain are characteristics of Western Sudanese territories, also in northern Darfur and Kordofan. Over the past 100 years, there have been 5 periods of prolonged drought in the region. 2 of them have happened in the last 20 years. In these areas, the average precipitation ranges from 100 to 600 millimeters per year, which with its lower limit poses a high probability of serious adverse consequences in the agricultural and livestock sectors. I think we've lost some of the maps here. So, what did Sudan do to tackle this problem? Seriously, Sudan since 1940s took a very long effort in combating desertification. In 1944, they established a report of Conservation Committee that established that soil degradation and desertification was mainly due to the misuses of land resources rather than a result of climate change. So Sudan highlighted since 1940s that the climate change issue. From 1972 to 1976, the National Committee for Combating Drought Desertification was established, and with the purpose of preparing of the studies and solutions to the problems of desertification and droughts. And further, in 1979, Minister of Agriculture was assigned a part-time coordinator to follow up desertification control projects. Together with the National Bureau for Drought Control and Desertification was established under supervision of Minister of Agriculture, and a decision was taken as Permanent Council of Desertification. In the 1980s, UNDP also provided technical and financial support, also designed as the Office for Coordination of Desertification Programs. And they hold 4 regional workshops to raise awareness and to consult the phenomenon of desertification and how to address these problems. And further, in 1986, established the Relief and Reconstruction Commission that was affiliated to Ministry of Agriculture. Also, external fund was raised. In 1988, another Council of Ministers decided to establish a Central Ministry of Refugees and Relief Affairs and included its structure and administration to combat desertification. And further, in 1991, they established a Drought and Desertification Coordination Unit, that's NDDU. 1993 also established the first GIS unit, and proud to announce this unit is affiliated to the National Center for Research in Sudan, where I work. And the responsibility was to technical support from European Union to monitor desertification and hazard of climate change. In 2001, Arab Organization for Agricultural Development also coordination project with Ministry of Agriculture in Sudan, and they opened commission to national recruitment to UNDP work. Again, 2002, National Action Program was prepared by Ministry of Agriculture together with United Nations, and 2009, the ratification law was provided by the government. 2015, another legislation was done by the President that ratification is a serious problem and should be taken seriously, even from the high-ranking person in the country. 2016, Secretary General of the National Council to Combat Ratification was appointed, and 2017, also a National Council to Combat Ratification was included and established in the Ministry of Environment, and I'm one member of this National Council. We started, and the government did so many effort to tackle the ratification, but still, this is the current situation now. What's going on? Since 1944, we are talking about ratification in Sudan and the hazard of climate change and food security. This photos was taken by my colleague, and in the right side map, this is a research station called the Rawakib Research Station. It's just 40 kilometers western of Khartoum, the city of Sudan, and we are taking responsibility to do research there to stop sand movement. Unfortunately, we failed. Sand is covering everywhere in Khartoum, keeps on moving towards the cities. Northern part is completely deteriorated. Even the soil characteristics completely change. We have another new zone from 30 centimeters, 40 centimeters in soils around northern states, the agricultural sector, another state, newly established soils transported from western part of Africa and cannot be used for agricultural production. So ratification now, I think, is the first problem that should be considered in Sudan. What can we do as partnership with private sectors? Some private sectors from other countries, not Sudanese, from Arab countries, they invest in these areas, but they have money. Sudan cannot invest in these areas. So what can we do? We need to secure food for 32 million people in Sudan. Concluding remarks, we concluded that serious attempts were made many years ago to formulate regulations and legislations and to coordinate with international and regional agreements. Despite these efforts, desertification is still defined as the major threat to sustainable development and human lives. Many conclusions and lessons emerge from the previous experiences of government, NGOs, civil societies, and private sectors in implementing desertification programs in Sudan. The analytical review of Sudan desertification policies showed a lack of the intersectoral approach that integrates forestry activities and land use into the social, economic, and developmental process in the country. They also lacked linkage to other sectors that use and actually compete for the available natural resources. And therefore, facts should be implemented to stop sand movement and improve soil quality. This is in addition to the interpretation of research results that deal with modeling, drought, and control, and we go back to the forest. And in the right hand, this is a book. It's published by my father, who was deceased in 2008. He was an environmentalist. He established the Environmental Society in Sudan. He wrote a book in Arabic, أطلال تحت الرمال أم طريق العودة إلى الغابة, and English, Ruins Under the Sands or Back to the Forest. He's the first one who to monitor the problem of desertification and briefed in one sentence, either we take serious measures or we'll go back to the forest again. And still the road, this is from our research station, western part of Sudan, of Khartoum. Still we have a long road paved with sands, but still some trees around here and there, and we keep on doing our research to combat desertification. And thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, this is it's not a new, I suppose, problem for Sudan or other countries. As you said, your father has already worked on them. But let us see if you have got any burning question, please. Thank you.
From Sudan myself, I give myself this permission to ask this question. Okay, so introduced a number of measures like teams and units and since 1940. What happened to the Green Belt? What happened, which it started, it was there sometime in Sudan. So what are the measures in place that has been put outside committees and policies to combat the desertation in Sudan? Agricultural policies, Green Belt, and political buy-in.
It's a good question. If you mean the Green Belt, that was built in the 1960s. Yeah, I think Sudan was the first country who focused on the problem of Green Belt and reducing temperatures. It does not exist anymore, as you know that, yeah? This is a serious problem. The problem is that the decision makers, sometimes they don't coordinate environmental problems with researchers and decision makers, yeah? This is a problem in Sudan. Now, they realize that the only way out to secure food to Sudanese population is to invest in desert, because we're only left with desert. Now they start thinking of Green Belt. Now it's done in Africa, in Sahel region. It's organized with other African countries. But our Sudan we need local solutions. Yeah, it's urgent. Now, especially the increase in temperature is accompanied with desertification and sand movement. Temperature is changing in Khartoum now, or in Sudan. We have two agricultural seasons, winter season and summer season. Winter season starts from November to March, and temperature should be from 25 to 29, and summer from 30 to 35 or 40 maximum. Now temperature in winter season reach up 40. That's why the farmers forget about for cropping other winter crops like wheat, for example. The government shifted, instead of solving the problem to reduce temperature and implement a Green Belt, they import wheat from outside country with hell of dollars every year to fill the gap between demand and supply. Yes, the problem is serious. We need intersectoral approach, coordination between different researchers, decision makers, and it should be done so fast, because now we're importing everything outside Sudan, even the vegetables. Thank you for the question.
Yes, we have another question from Nahlaa. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Sarra, Sufyan, and Prof. Alam for this important subject. Effort taken by Sudan in combating desertification from governmental and private sectors. What do you think about the role of research institutions as integrated part of this problem?
Yes, we as researchers, we have the ideas and scientific knowledge. How can we stop sand? Yeah. Different methods, scientific methods can be used. The modeling, application of drought-resistant crops. But we are not decision makers. Yeah. Yeah, this is the problem. We need the relation between the private sector is another issue. Now we should start with the first step. Coordinate Sudanese researchers who are in each research institutions and take our idea and ask for the private sector to apply what we have done. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Anyone else, please? Just last question. Yeah, thank you.
Good morning. Please excuse my voice. I have a question. You pointed out that there was a lack of intersectorality. I've seen through the slides that the issue has gone for the Minister of Agriculture, the Minister of Environment. How has the matter gone from one agency to another and brought up no intersectorality? Is the work done in silos? And how do you plan on breaking those silos and have an intersectoral solution or response to that?
Question, but I think if I said the question correctly, you asked about you have Ministry of Environment, Agriculture, the relation between them. Yes. Yes, happily enough that last year they established the Certification Council under the President, which is good, and members represented from all ministers, Environment, Agriculture Ministry, from research centers. I am a member of this council. They started this late. Although they declared the problem of certification in the 1940s, 1917 they established the Certification Council. It took many years to establish, to realize this coordination, importance of coordination, but it's done lately.
Thank you very much, and let's move to the next topic. The topic is understanding the attitude of Generation Y towards transport apps. The case of Dubai. The presenter is Professor Ghassan Abu-Lebdeh.
Thank you. Understanding the attitude of Generation Y towards transport applications, the case of Dubai. This is part of the master thesis work for my former graduate student, Renji Kachura. At the onset, I would like to note that none of what I present here is a view of the government of Dubai or any unit, formal unit in the United Arab Emirates. Just a bit of a background. The sustainability in general, but in the is a prime topic in the United Arab Emirates. But in particular, the city of Dubai has been doing a lot of work. A lot of it is really courageous and innovative. Some of it is starting to bear some fruits. Other is still sort of work in progress. So this work is in that general context. Many initiatives were rolled out, but in particular one was aimed at sort of converting all government services, transportation related and everything else, to make it smart, that you can sort of do it and finish it using your mobile or tablet or any other device. Many of those services were transportation specific, transportation related, and with that the government rolled out a lot of apps that were made sort of available, announced about them, and encouraged everybody to download them and use them. Based on anecdotal evidence thus far, it looks like there is progress, but we're not sure if it is really what's desired at this stage. Just to get back and sort of on this particular research, the objective was simply to investigate the impact of the RTA's mobile apps on travel behavior of Generation Y in Dubai. The RTA is the Road Transport Authority of Dubai, so think of it as the Ministry of Transport, but particularly dealing with road transport. The research question was, have the RTA's mobile-based apps brought about change in travel behavior among Generation Y in Dubai? The significance of this work is clear from a few of the points that you see here on the slide. A significant percentage of the population of Dubai is young, Generation Y. Globally, the United Arab Emirates is first in smartphone use. Generation Y in particular, and again, Generation Y, I'm referring to folks who are in the age group 18 to 34, are first in use of smart phones in the United Arab Emirates, as you can see, over 90%. However, again, based on what you observe, anecdotal evidence, it doesn't look like the behavior of this generation, at least as far as transportation is concerned, perhaps beyond, but I'll just speak about transportation. Their behavior, it does not seem to be sustainable, if you will, or it's not really pointing in the right direction. And here I'm referring particularly to use of private automobile and the excessive use of it, and the very low vehicle occupancy and such indications that sort of all point to one thing, that maybe we're not making the progress that we would like to. Studies in different parts of the world aimed at use of mobile apps indicated that actually those mobile apps can be used to influence the behavior of certain groups. And in this particular case, we found evidence that you can actually influence the behavior of Generation Y, not regarding travel in particular, but you can influence their behavior regarding many other aspects as well. So there is no reason to believe that you cannot really influence their behavior to make it more sustainable, if you will, as far as travel and transportation. There is a vision by the city of Dubai for the city to be a sustainable and smart city by 2021, and that's not really too far off. So clearly there is concern that, are we making enough progress or not? more importantly, and I have not seen enough evidence to sort of, there is no clear understanding on where the public stands, and in particular, where does Generation Y stand as far as this vision? And are they really embracing this vision, or they just think it's for somebody else? A lot of apps were rolled out, all are transportation related. Not all of them are travel related per se. If you look at the screen here to the right, you can see, for example, you can pay your, you can renew registration of your vehicle, you can pay fees, you can pay fines, you can order a taxi, you can check on the schedule of the bus or the metro, many other things that you can do it just from your mobile. So as far as accessibility and usefulness and comprehensiveness of those apps, I think it's no question that you can do just about everything you want without really having to traditionally travel to do those services. In addition, the RTA, Ministry of Transport, if you will, installed free Wi-Fi in many locations. When I say 450, that's quite a bit of coverage in the city of Dubai. So to go about this research, it's very simple. We formulated relevant hypotheses, collected data to help us deal with those hypotheses. Then we tested those hypotheses and then looked at the results and tried to make sense of them. Going a little too far here. Five hypotheses were formulated and tested. Here's just a quick run of those. The first one, Generation Y in Dubai are smartphone users and are aware of the RTA's mobile apps. Hypothesis number 2, mobile apps play important role in the transport sector and provide real-time public transport location and timing information. Number 3, services provided by the apps may have a positive impact on Generation Y's travel behavior, specifically managing their travel demands and reducing unnecessary trips or consolidating trips, if you will, especially during peak times. Hypothesis number 4, travel-related apps may serve as an appropriate tool for communicating with Generation Y by encouraging them to use smart services for trip planning, thereby reducing their private automobiles. And number 5, factors such as weather, urban form, social demographic variable, psychosocial variables, and convenience or lack of convenience when it comes to public transport promote or actually encourages the use of private automobiles. So we collected enough data, if you will, and asked a lot of questions that all aimed at addressing or answering those 5 hypotheses. The form of data was a self-administered survey, conducted that online, and we sort of sent it out using social media. Some of the questions were quantitative, some were descriptive or qualitative. We got the results, summarized them, developed contingency or pivot tables to sort of test the hypotheses or check for their significance, and then looked at the text data or categorical data and tried to sort of read through it and see what it means. I don't think you're going to follow those details. I'm not intending those details for you to look, but if you look at the top, hypothesis number 1 that stated Generation Y in Dubai are smartphone users and are aware of the RTA mobile-based apps. There are 2 parts to this hypothesis. If you look all the way at the bottom, the data proved the first part, but actually the data is conflicting with the second part. The second hypothesis, mobile apps play an important role in the transport sector by providing real-time public transport, location, timing information, so on and so forth. Again, the data proves the data that we collected proved the first part of the hypothesis, but the second part of this hypothesis actually conflicts with a lot of other results that were in the that we got. Here, for example, Generation Y rarely, this is something we found. It looks like they rarely actually use the RTA mobile apps. They prefer to use their private automobile. Simple. Number 3, both hypotheses 3 and 4 actually, the first part of both was proven, but the data unfortunately conflicted with the second part. So number 3, apps may have positive impact, yes, but then I don't know, it just something is missing, but those apps are not really leading to actual avoidance of travel during peak times. The apps seem to be helping in sort of enforcing the point or making the point that those apps could serve as a tool, but then when you look at the actual use of the private automobiles, it's inconsistent. So, first half is okay, it looks like it is proven, but the second half is really conflicting what the data has showed. As to number 5, there are different parts of this hypothesis. The first part, again, it has to do with factors, whether they are actually influencing the choice of transportation. Weather conditions, I think those of you who visited Dubai know that a good part of the year, 6, 7, maybe 8 months, the weather is a bit extreme and uncomfortable, especially if you want to walk to a transit, to a bus or a metro station. So we wanted to see if actually weather conditions are a factor and whether urban travel, urban form, socio-demographic variables, and so on and so forth. The first one, again, if you look whether weather conditions were actually a factor, if you look all the way to the bottom to your right, the data actually proves the first factor. That is, weather conditions indeed is a factor in people opting for their private automobiles and not walking to buses or metro stations. The second part, also urban form, the data prove that that's an issue. And of course, when I say urban form, that's a loaded term. So you could say what is really meant by urban form. But here, just for simplicity, maybe, the mixed use is lacking. In Dubai, if you look at the land use, you will see areas where it's purely residential and then other areas that are purely commercial. So sometimes even if you want to buy a little one item, you really need to hop in your car and just drive for quite a distance to fulfill the need of that trip. So that's what we really mean here. The third factor, socio-demographic variables, and again, the data proved that this is a factor, and that has to do with Dubai is an interesting place in many respects. 85% probably the population is expatriates, and among those, there is a good number of workers, construction workers and otherwise, who probably don't have a choice in terms of travel. They probably are transit captive and so on and so forth. So that is a factor in choosing or not choosing to drive. As to the fourth variable, social variable, that doesn't seem to be an issue. You can think here of psychology and trying to show off and your vehicle as a statement of your status and so on and so forth. In some places, that's a factor. I thought it was a factor in our place, but the data said no, so I'll just go by that. And finally, the last factor that has to do with the convenience, or actually lack of convenience of public transport, is a factor in people actually persisting with their private vehicles. And here I would like to note that, walking distance, for example, if in a weather like Dubai, you really need to have a very short walking distance to get to a bus or to a metro station. Otherwise, people are not going to walk more than probably 4 minutes. That's probably in other places, that's peanuts. You could walk for a lot more than that. But in extreme heat and humidity, that's a challenge. I would like to note that I think all transit stations, bus stations in Dubai are air conditioned. So I think we are just about out of time, but I'm towards the end here. So in summary, I think the data showed us that less than half of Generation Y are actually aware of RTA mobile apps. They maybe are aware of them, but they just completely are oblivious to their significance. The apps or the app users find them useful whenever they use them. And I think here the reference is to apps that are related not to driving or taking the transit, but maybe apps that will enable them to pay their fines or check on their registration and so on and so forth. 40% of the app users actually rarely use those apps. That's not really encouraging. About 75% of them either own or have access to a vehicle. And again, a lot of those folks, they really don't work. They don't have an income to really own a vehicle. That's quite a statement here. And again, from other work that we've done, car affordability or auto affordability in Dubai is probably #1 in the world. I think that's a serious issue here. At the end, I think back to our proposition, it looks like we couldn't sort of say yes to that question that we sort of set out to answer. The apps even though they're not changing the behavior, I think still they have the potential to change that behavior. Weather conditions and other factors maybe are issues, but they're not really the whole story. With that, I will stop. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And this is really very interesting in a sense that we are talking here about competing with investment or capital or whatever, isn't it? And from the public sector. And I'm sure this particular study is going to give lots of, answers to the questions by the government or the public. Can I ask for a couple of questions only, please? Yep.
Economic development. I've been to Dubai for quite a few times, and I agree with what we heard from you in terms of the summary of your research. One part of the research I didn't hear, or maybe I missed it. Did you, the people that were interviewed, were they also asked about the quality of the public apps? Were they happy about them? Were they expecting something else? It could be that they're just simply not interesting enough for the young to tune in.
Thank you. That's an excellent question. We did. There were other questions. This is just part of the thesis of Renji. But we did ask some questions as to whether they find them useful, they are easy to understand and all that. And that didn't seem to be an issue. We couldn't, from at least the responses, we could not tell that it's actually the design or the quality of the app that's really standing in the way.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yeah, just waiting for the microphone, but it's okay. It's a very interesting finding, actually, because it is counterintuitive as well. I just wonder if there is a cultural element into that. Have it been, investigated as part of your questionnaire? Because, probably people look down upon people who use public transport, so they are not interested. Is there any such factor?
And another excellent question. I think there is that factor, but if you are to really ask people, again, from anecdotal evidence, from just discussions with students and colleagues and friends and all that, I think if you, for example, ride your bicycle, that's just not really a good sign. That's just not for you as a professional and all that. Bicycles are only for people who cannot afford vehicles and all that. I ride my bicycle on campus, and I more than once actually was knocked right to the ground. And they just didn't even bother to stop. I think, so the answer to your question, and again, I don't have evidence to it, but I'll just answer it based on what I know and I've seen and sort of heard. There is a cultural element. And I think it's using transit, using the bus, using the metro, elsewhere, I think is just, people don't think about it, and I think it makes a lot of sense if you want to think economics, environment, and all that. But owning a nice vehicle and driving your vehicle and so on and so forth, it's also a sign of status and maybe looked upon sort of positively in our context. And I think at the end of the day, I think a lot of people are sort of part of where they are, and therefore I think when they decide what mode of transport to take, they probably are conscious of what those who are around them think. Long answer to a short question, but I think the answer is yes.
Thank you. We would like to get another one. This is the last question, please. Oh, hang on, because we are having some, time constraints, so see how it goes. Please go ahead.
The same point of view. So I think the three main points is cultural problem. Indeed, Arab culture, it's not for public transport. The second point is we have the same case in Algeria, where the government is subsidizing the oil as long in Algeria the price of 1 liter of oil or petrol or diesel is more expensive than 1 liter of mineral water. So with this case, everyone is going for car rather than public transport. And the third point is as long as a weather problem as well. So I can share your point of view. So in Algeria, the government is providing all public transport, but people are reluctant for using them because for first, being independent, second is cultural problem, and the third, as long as the government, the price of oil is cheap in Dubai and in Algeria, as I said, it's cheaper than a liter of mineral water, so that's the reason why people, they would never use, or we can't influence their choice to use public transport. So it's more than comment than question, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid our reporter wants me to ask another person to ask your question, please. Thank you. Short, please. Yeah.
It's me.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Amos Wamatapurai. I work with the United Nations here in this building. I have three questions. Thank you for the presentation from United Arab Emirates. I always stop there on my way to the Pacific. First question. The apps, I believe United Arab Emirates it's rich enough to provide and develop these RTA-based apps for free to the users. Second question would be, in the context of this meeting that we are here today, public-private partnerships for implementation of the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development, I want to see how it fits into this whole debate. For instance, is Uber there? You know the Uber? Is Uber in United Arab Emirates? Is there a partnership between RTA and Uber, for instance? Or are you looking into this? Or given Uber's track record, you might not want it to be there. I don't know. And last question would be, how do you put these research results into public policy? Translate them into public policy?
Thank you. I'll start from the last and go backward.
Yeah, I think since we are really running out of time, just you can go for third one, please.
I think if I'm to take anything from this to the government, clearly we need more a stick than the carrots that we're giving. I think we need a lot of disincentives to make owning and operating a vehicle, make it more expensive. It's I think, goes without saying. So this is, I think, an evidence that we need to do more on that. And until we make the utility of the vehicle so sort of expensive, people are just not going to switch. To the second question, yes, there is a partnership between the government of Dubai and Uber. So Uber operates in Dubai, but not the form that we are familiar here. It's different. I can explain it some other time. We don't have time for it. But there is that. And as to the first one, how does it fit? I thought it fits very well. I think we can talk about sustainability and push for it, but I think if the facts on the ground are pointing that we're not making enough progress towards our goals and objectives, then clearly we need to really see what's not working and fix it. So the results are there, and I think the government can take them and make whatever, but I think they're very useful to point to the fact that we're not seeing as many or as much progress as we would like, at least with respect to this group of folks, Generation Y.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Our last speaker today is Vilma Dahiana.
Sí.
And her presentation is on sustainable economic development in post-conflict Colombia. Very interesting. Thank you very much. And please go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you for your introduction. I'm Vilma Bedoya. I come from Colombia, as you will say. And I want to make clear that anything I will say here must not be considered as a government position or or communication as official communication of the government, because I'm here as an independent, as a citizen, to show and to share my point of view, or perhaps the point of view of many of Colombian citizens about the post-conflict and the peace agreement that recently was signed in our country with one of the oldest guerrillas in the world. Thank you. This one? Okay. Well, the guerrilla of the FARC and the Colombian government signed recently a peace agreement regarding, sorry, I'm a bit nervous. We will talk about the support that
take your time, don't worry.
That private enterprises could offer to stable, to offer a better and stable peace, and to understand better the context. In the chart, we can see a distribution of the ethnical affiliation of my country. 85%, almost 86%, does not have an ethnical affiliation. With this, I want to show that mostly our conflict is not for ethnical reasons, but for political. Some minority groups, as indigenous and Afro descendants, are still seeking political representation and fundamental rights equity. The nature of the conflict, as I said, it's political. And this majority is conformed by descendants from the Spanish heritage and the mixture of the people that came from Africa, the indigenous, and the Spanish itself. Now, briefly, we will see the history of the conflict. As I said, we were conquered by the Spanish in about 1525. By 1819, there were a war like the Independence War. Yeah. By 1899, to 1902, the War of the Thousand Days between the liberal and conservatives, which is the same to the Republicans and Democrats in the United States. Yeah, it was like the beginning of the war, because to be honest, during the history of our country, the politicals has been just divided into two groups. And the problem is that there is no participation for other points of view. In 1948, in the middle of an electoral campaign, one of the most privileged candidates was killed, and it was the beginning of the Bogotazo. It gave, as a result, the present conflict that we had. Because after that point, some other groups of guerrillas born, as the FARC and in 1964 and the M19 in 1971. In 1985, was quite recent, the M19 tried to take the power by taking they tried to enter to the Palace of Justice. And in this event, many people disappear, and most of them are still disappeared in hands of the regular forces. One of the theories is that of the fire of that building, it's that it was with the intention of delete all the backup of information about narco-traffickers in the process of extradition at that time. At the same year, again, that same year, it was founded a political party that gave space for left groups as the FARC and other communist parties, and it was called the Patriotic Union. But in the coming years, its members were systematically killed to almost zero. By 1989, the M19 becomes a big political party, but in the same year, the candidate from the UPP presidential candidate and the Liberal Party were murdered during the presidential campaign of that year. By 1990, we have a new constitution that gave some rights that performed the participation in politics in our country. In 2012, the current president, 2002, the president announced the start of a strong war in all the rural places where the guerrillas evaded, because the process of peace that they well developed failed. Yeah, sorry. Wait. All that history ended almost last year when President Mr. Manuel Santos, when he began the process of peace with the guerrilla in 2010, ended with the signature in 2016. Yep. Today, the government is facing a war against the FARC dissidents and the ELN guerrilla, whom stopped their recent peace talks developed in Quito, Ecuador, in the last year. It's hard to come here to talk about peace when still there are signs of violence from these dissidents groups, but well, the figures of the conflict were so strong and made us to move towards the peace. As we can see, the Colombian conflict left more than 7.9 million of victims, many more than the other confrontations in the world. As Sudan, with 200,000 victims, and Sierra Leone, with 120,000 victims, more or less. Then we have other conflicts at Rwanda, Guatemala, El Salvador, Peru, and Argentina, which had about 8,000 disappear or more. The final agreement, it's a document that it's divided in 6 chapters. But here we will just mention in detail those that have a direct relation with economic development. In Chapter 1, we have a comprehensive rural reform, the sources for land found, and the right to private property. The agreement has as the victims as beneficiaries of all that. The rural development economic model involves a plan for territorial development. In Chapter 2, they consider political participation. And as a part of that, the last node, known as FARC guerrilla, founded a party called Common Alternative Revolutionary Force. The idea is to guarantee their participation in the Congress with 10 positions there. Just replying them with their need of being political active participants of the development of the country. In Chapter 3, they consider the end of the conflict with details and or steps to develop the agreement. One of the most biggest problem in Colombia is the drugs problem. Then in chapter 4, they try to specify the solution for that problem with an idea that could be involved also in economic terms, that it's the illicit crop substitution. It means they try to change the crops of illegal drugs for food and other sources for the people. In chapter 5, they consider the victims, and they made something that it's the first time that have been developed in the world of conflict agreements, of conflict solutions, sorry. It's called the Special Jurisdiction for Peace. There, they gave the voice for victims and heard their stories, and even in front of the criminals that made the things they do, they just try to hear both parts also. In chapter 6, we have implementation and verification. The role of the private enterprises involving the private sector, as we have considered as long as this Congress, the role of PPPs is the way in which the companies could really have an active role. 2 minutes? No, no longer. It's just this and this. Okay. The social preparation for the post-conflict Colombia is important because most of the companies doesn't know what happened, doesn't know, they don't know the history of the conflict, and they don't know how they could contribute. There are other benefits for them in taxes to the companies that want to invest in the most affected areas of the conflict. And the establishment of small and medium-sized enterprises, it's very important because they constitute the majority of the companies in the country. So it's more about education than the restriction or perhaps persecution of ideas. I just wanted to share some economic review about Colombia. As you could see, last year the inflation began to decrease, but the government take the decision to increase the value-added tax to all the products of regular consumption, and so it made that the consumption in the country decreased by the end of the last year and the beginning of this. Here I have some insights about how to start a business in Colombia. If you want more details, I could share it with you. And this, for me, this is the final. But with this, we could see the real problem. We are just emphasizing all in the fossil fuels and mining products, but we have all the potential to grow in farming, food, and beverages, especially in the agricultural sector, because we have all the sources to do it. As country, we have the land, we have the knowledge, and I think that politicians must put more interest and more sources in support the rural development for the economical growth too. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. And well, we have 5 minutes left, I suppose. Is there any? Right? Yep. Thank you.
Mike,
yeah.
Yep, I got the mic. So thank you, Chairman. Colombia Argentina, Peru, El Salvador, Sudan, Sierra Leone, Rwanda, all these countries have conflicts. And the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, aim this year is to include peace in all development goals. Without peace, there cannot be no development. There can be no sustainable development. When you look at 2 billion people of the developing world who depend on agriculture, for instance, for their export revenue earnings, domestic savings, employment, and sustenance, we have to look at peace, and the idea of peace dividend being included in the sustainable development triangle of environment, social, and economic has to be included in there. And lastly, let me give you another point. Coffee, of which Colombia also produces coffee. Yes, the whole edifice of the $1 trillion global value chain is rested on the backs of hard-pressed farmers, poor farmers. If Colombians do not have peace, how do we get sustainable development in there? Thank you.
Sir, it's okay? Yeah. Do you want to? Yeah.
I just want to say that I'm pretty agree with you, because peace must be taken as a right, not as a political privilege. That's all.
Thank you. Please, go ahead.
In regards to what you just said at the end regarding sustainable peace in the rural areas, the SDG 17.17, if you look at the text, says public, private, and civil society partnerships. Now, in the rural areas, this could easily be cooperatives, because cooperatives are, I think, in Colombia too, maybe a viable way to organize themselves to produce something and to take care of poverty and other issues. So there are examples that exist where cooperatives also partner with private companies with a government that supports it. So I think it would be worthwhile to look into this as a way to achieve at the same time peace and make the whole piece also economically viable in terms of development. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, there are many of those cooperatives, not only in coffee, but in other products. And the government, with institutions as Pro-Colombia, are supporting the exports of those products. So the government has the tools. Perhaps there is still like a lack of interest of some of the private enterprises that they, as I see, they don't have like the commitment to be involved in this process, especially the companies located in the principal cities that don't have like a direct touch with the rural problems, despite that they depend on them, because from rural it's from the products come.
Thank you very much. I think I'm afraid, please, short.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. It's more of a comment, just because having recently, Malaysia, I'm from the Permanent Mission of Malaysia, and having recently hosted the 9th World Urban Forum in Kuala Lumpur in February, I'm just inclined to share some takeaways from the forum, where the forum was represented by about 165 member states and a broad range of stakeholders from UN agencies to civil society, which really reflected a very firm and global commitment towards this goal of creating sustainable cities and communities. And from there, we had the theme of Cities 2030, Cities for All. And the forum presented participants to look back at the implementation of the new urban agenda, which is something that, after listening very attentively to all the speakers just now, I only have one conclusion, whereby the effective implementation of the new urban agenda and also the SDGs, we have to come up with innovative solutions. And innovative solutions ultimately means new partnerships, as mentioned, whether it's private-public partnerships or whether it's cooperatives. Ultimately, that is how we can achieve the implementation, effectively achieve the implementation of the new urban agenda and, of course, the SDG goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think before we'd like to close, perhaps I would like to summarize or make some points which are very important. But I'm not going to do that because we are running out of time. One thing which I would like to do, though, is a commercial. Commercial is, this is a book we just published this year, is on the pathways to sustainable development. And that was published by the Springer, New York. Why I'm saying this? Because all those sort of topics we dealt with today, we are in fact looking for a pathway, isn't it, for sustainable development. So I think if you care, please go through that book, and then we will see that what was our intention to achieve those. Thank you very much, and thank you for attending.
So please remember, if we all help and do a little bit, it will make a big difference.